think that's very helpful. Lisa, you look like you're wanting to say
Well,
something.
I wanted to come back to your rights question.
Yes.
It's,
And then we're going to open it to you. So if some people would like to stand up at the microphone, I saw Lisa Wright there and Leslie Wright, sorry. Yeah, so Lisa, and then we're going to turn
quickly, I
open
think
to you all.
in a non-traditional look, it's kind of not only what your question of this panel, is there a new landscape for social justice? And you sort of said, how important are rights? I thought it was interesting that in the last administration, we battled on Social Security. And we saw Americans essentially defend an insurance program, essentially, and see it as a right. And I think tying back to the Roosevelt moment, or I would say, what is it that we're creating now that people will come to see as a right? And, that will be enshrined in our public discourses. This is just something that our children, that our grandmothers, and I think that's how I would like to take your question on rights. What embeds now in our national sense of who we are and what this sense of diminishing our inequity really belongs to. And I think we add to the social insurance contract at this moment.
All right, maybe some others in the audience have some thoughts on this, so let's go here. Now, we'll probably take a few questions before we turn it back, or comments. Yes, so do introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Leslie Wright from the U.S. National Committee for UNIFEM, which is the United Nations Development Fund. And I wanted to broaden this discussion a little bit so that it includes all the marvelous space that's just opened up in terms of our international commitments. And I think that this speech in Cairo is one beginning, and I think seeking and finding where our space is going to be in terms of the international community is something that's really critical. And I'd like to have this discourse in terms of rights, in terms of where we stand economically and so forth, broadened a little bit to the global agenda.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes.
I'm Shipra Bronzeneck, and I'm an organizational consultant, and I've been involved in a lot of women's leadership work and social justice work. It's taken just in the community I was working in of Jewish social justice groups. I think we've been working for 3 years to get what we started this April, which was a collaborative table for 14, called the G14, for 14 groups to kind of come together in this environment and figure out how are we going to move an agenda. So I'm seeing that struggle. I'm really interested in terms of the broader frame of understanding how you're seeing the transformation of nonprofit agencies as able to continue their valuable individual, political, and social justice work while really moving to a much higher level strategically to think about building the effective alliances that are going to be able to create the narratives that you are talking about that are about structural change that will be required for all of these individual agendas around opportunities and rights. Is this happening in the great city of Washington? I would be thrilled to hear that it is. Where are you seeing it? I'm seeing it in segments, but I'm not seeing it across the board, but I'm hoping it's happening and not visible yet.
Great, thank you for both of your questions, both about the global and the alliances for deep structural change to get out of our individual silos and bailiwicks. Let's take just a couple of questions over here too, and then we can turn it back to the panel for final comments. And you can make your train back to Washington. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hi, my name is Liana Casar, and for the past dozen years I've been working in healthcare administration and women's health, and have just switched to start a small business in this wonderful economy. And one of the things that I hear sort of as a theme throughout is privilege. And it seems that if we are going to have a narrative, we really need to have a narrative that talks about unearned privilege and unearned lack of privilege. And it seems that as we talk about unemployment, and especially with the trauma example, it seems that there is a feeling of privilege for white males for jobs, and that is, that's just been a historical privilege, and that's seems like a very important piece of this. As well, coming from the healthcare perspective, watching people feel very privileged about their health insurance and the health care that they can get when they are insured, I think is another piece of the conversation. I'd love universal health care, but the people who are going to have to share, who right now have a privilege of wonderful health care, are really going to have to learn to share with those who don't have very much health care? And how do you see managing that part of the conversation?
Thank you. We're going to take the other questions over there as well, please. Yes.
I just want to congratulate.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Donna Shavlik on the board of the National Council for Research on Women, and this is really the first conversation that I have heard talking about deep structural change and systemic change. And what that takes is all the things that you have talked about. I just wanted to make a plug for the fact that young people now in colleges and universities are doing social service work, social justice programs are springing up everywhere. But I think they're still in the context of the old story of the paradigms that you have identified. I'd like to see us try to give those young people and the teachers that are working on those programs an opportunity to hear the kinds of things that you all are talking about in terms of how they construct that. And I was so impressed with what Alan said about some of those individual words that have stuck in our minds and how we need to have a series of those that describe what we're talking about today. So, because I've been so impressed, a lot of, I come from Colorado, and a group of doctors, just this is one illustration of this, a group of doctors in Fort Collins gave a presentation on single-payer healthcare system, and were so passionate about it and had those words to give us that would allow us to understand how that would work. But I don't hear those kinds of stories coming into some of these things that are trying to take place in the administration. And I feel like what Obama did during the campaign, I know it's hard for him to do that now, but that's our job to reinforce and support the fact that he raised that image for us. And so I just hope that those things we can connect somehow, the people who are trying to think about social justice in a broader sense, and including the impact on the global situation. So I just would like to add that to the mix.
Thank you, Donna. And I think we have one more question there.
Hi, I'm Maida Brown. I work with the Center for Employment Opportunities. We help people coming home from prison get and keep jobs. My question is in terms of narrative strategy and alliances, I understand that you all work with national organizations, but in terms of local and regional things that are really going to be your keys to communities and community work, I mean, Obama had these overarching themes and values, but a lot of that was on the ground work that was they'd had years where these were prepared in communities. So how, as national organizations, are you going to create alliances around all these issues in local and regional areas?
Thank you very much for bringing the local and the regional in. And of course, that's a huge question and issue for member centers of the National Council for Research on Women,